From local office to federal office, Pete Aguilar has ruled over the Inland Empire for 2 decades. My next guest is attempting to end Aguilar's reign in the Inland Empire. Antonis Christodoulou, who I hope I pronounced his name correctly, is here with me now as a congressional candidate for California's 33rd Congressional District. He's here with me now challenging Pete Aguilar. Thank you so much, Anthony, for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me, Cameron.
We'll dive deep into your policy platform in a moment, but why run for this seat?
So hello, I'm Antonis Christodoulou. I am a 27-year-old progressive running for Congress right now in California 33 in the Inland Empire. I was raised by a single mother who would commute 2 to 3 hours each way to UCLA. I grew up in Rancho, and she would always tell me how you could never, no matter what you do, your education could not be taken away from you. So then I went on to go to UC Irvine to study political science with a pre-law focus, and then I went to law school in Washington, D.C. and graduated in 2025. And then I started being more and more involved in politics. I would pay attention, I would focus on what's going on around me, and I used my legal degree to understand the nuances. And I grew frustrated and angry hearing Democrats throughout the board say that we can't afford certain things. We can't have all these things like healthcare. We can't afford to have housing. We can't afford to have education. We can't afford to have livable wages. And I grew very frustrated. And at the time, I was watching Zoran and other progressives run their campaigns and run successful campaigns that got people my age and others excited to go out and vote because we were voting for something and not just against something. So that invigorated me to learn more about the campaign process. And then once I felt prepared, I put myself in the running, and I'm here right now to challenge the number 3 Democrat in the House to try and get the party more focused towards the working class people, because I feel like they've left them alone and they focus on their donors instead and their corporate benefactors instead of the working class people. And I want to push this party back towards that.
Many Democratic Party politicians will call themselves progressives. We'll get into your policies in a moment, but what does that word mean to you?
For me, being progressive means being for the working class people. It means being for the youth. It means being for the average American who is just trying to live. I found myself after high school, I'm 27, so the 10 years I've been focused on politics and trying to learn in my adult life, I've been listening to a lot from both sides, Republicans and Democrats, and I thought there was a true center to this argument between the two. And then I started focusing on what Republicans were saying, and I figured out that these people don't care about us. These people in the Republican Party were focused on their donors and wealthy benefactors and corporate interest instead of us. So I immediately left in starting trying to understand what they were trying to fight for, and I started looking at the Democratic Party. And when I started doing that, I started noticing that Democrats were also being funded by the same people. They were focused on donors. They were focused on these things that weren't making our material conditions better. In fact, they were passing modest reform. Even during Biden's presidency, we watched as Democrats, centrist Democrats like Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin were the first barriers to getting infrastructure bill passed, where they cut his infrastructure bill in half, and then and they cut it again, and then Republicans touched it. So being progressive is, in my view, how a lot of us need to focus on governing our society in federal, state, and local. Being progressive means we're going to be supporting people when they need it most, providing social programs, and making sure our taxes are used in our community and not used to make wealthy people even richer, and also not used to bomb foreign countries, and instead funding our own education and funding our own youth and our future. And I think that is the most important thing.
Let's go into policies. You want to bring affordable housing to the 33rd district. A lot of young people, not just in the 33rd district, but all throughout California, are struggling to find and buy a home. It's a tough real estate market. What is the plan to help young people get a house in your district?
Okay, so
Oh, go ahead. I think you.
half of that was cut out, but I think I understand the question. Um, so focus on people making housing more affordable in the nation, more housing. We need to provide assistance to smaller builders, to local builders, and then make sure that they have the funds and the capital to be able to go on these ventures and build housing. Build in our communities, whether it is working with local and state governments to work on zoning laws to make sure we can build actual dense housing that people can live in who are my age. Because many people my age, they can't afford to live in this current district, or they can't afford to be in this area, along with the job market currently too, where a lot of people I know are moving to Temecula, moving around the country, moving to places where they have to find work because they can't afford to live here. So I would want to do that as one of my first measures, is focusing on building more housing, funding local projects through the federal government. And in addition, I think the most important thing is to make sure we limit the private equity and venture capital and Wall Street from owning our housing industry. Since the pandemic, we've heard many stories about these private profit interest groups trying to buy up housing, trying to buy up units, trying to buy up apartments so they can make a profit from a necessity that we need, which is a roof over our head and all these things. So it would focus on making sure we pass actual bills that stop the corporate interest from coming in and owning our housing, and then trying to make a pretty penny off that too. Because when we end up seeing rate hikes, sometimes we are witnessing corporate greed. I know that our housing industry and our apartments aren't entirely owned by these corporations, but they have a big effect on it. And one of the reasons why I chose the federal position initially was because I viewed the federal power to stop this as the strongest. In fact, using consumer protection laws and antitrust laws to make sure that we can limit all of these corporations from creating monopolies, duopolies, and controlling our markets in housing. Because we all need a house. We all should have a housing, a roof over our head, and it should be affordable. So we're not giving our money to these wealthy companies that end up bringing that give the extra profits to their shareholders, give those profits to their executives, give golden parachutes to their CEOs so they can go somewhere else. This is all what we've been paying for the past 10 years at least, that I've been paying attention. And when I've learned about how the country has been run from before I was even born, it's also been making a move towards that. So that is also a measure I'm focused on. And in the long term, I want to convert empty lots and facilities into housing. We need to convert them into public and social housing, which are not free, but they are at market cost. So our government comes in working with federal, state, and local agencies to make sure that we can provide a competitor to these wealthy interest groups, to these wealthy groups that try and profit from our housing. So what I want to do is work with the state, local, and federal governments to make sure we can get affordable housing, get it built, and then have the government own it and maintain it so they can compete against these wealth and interest groups, so we can bring down the costs. Because what we're seeing, like I said earlier, a lot of our funding goes straight to these executives, these wealthy families, these wealthy corporations, and we don't see any of that in our communities. That rent doesn't get back into our communities. They don't spend in our communities. They end up holding all this wealth, and then we end up sitting there thinking, where's all this money we're paying rent on? Our HVAC hasn't been working. Our floors are flooded. Everything's not looking good, and there's mold. And yet we're seeing this issue persist, and we need to fix the affordability in our country.
You mentioned empty lots and building housing to fill those empty lots, but some who environmentalists, environmental groups, when they hear build more housing, they may object to it and say, we want to preserve California's beautiful nature and we don't want to increase housing supply because it's going to destroy California's nature. What is your message to environmental groups who do oppose building more housing units?
I understand the need to protect our environments. This is very important. I'm very much for strengthening our EPA and making sure that our communities aren't being poisoned and our communities are safe from environmental factors that persist. What I have to say to that is we have a lot of empty facilities. I've spoken with a candidate for Fontana, and many people who live in Fontana who mentioned that these giant warehouses are being used, and some of them are poisoning their local communities, and then others are going empty. So if we are able to capture these already built areas, clean them up, make sure that their land, the land and soil and everything is safe and habitable, and then we build up social housing and build up small 15-minute cities to be able to create a denser population that also can end up lowering the amount of people on the road too. If we make our cities more walkable, we build robust transit systems, we build up and we make it so people who live in giant apartments can just walk downstairs and go to a grocery store, go to a bar, and meet some friends, do all these things. They don't need to take a car and go 40, 50 minutes or 30 minutes away to just get somewhere. So when I mention building these social housing, and I mean by building housing in a way that is actually feasible and actually economical and is environmentally friendly. If we can build on these already built plots, because if you drive around the district, you'll see empty parking lots, you'll see unused land everywhere, and it's not picturesque. It's not something that we look at and say we're proud of that. Our environment is proud of the fact that we have a lot of empty parking lots. I think what we need to do is focus more on these types of cities where we can make it walkable, make them safe, and make them also affordable. And then in the long end, it will end up improving our environmental situation. So that is what I have to say to those organizations, and I would love to work with them to make sure that we have safe communities in the environment.
And sometimes when housing is being built, housing projects, they may be for luxury apartments or for certain clientele. But what about, or what is your plan to help those who are unhoused, those who are on the streets, homeless, and they want housing? Do you have a plan for promoting an idea of increasing shelters or housing for those who are on the streets?
Yes, I am focused on dealing with our unhoused and also people who are priced out of the market who are just can't afford to live or they can't find a place to live like that. So I recently met a young woman who explained to me that she is on Section 8 housing right now. She is dealing with going between housing and having housing that is uninhabitable, where she is kicked out if she ends up complaining about the housing unit. If she says that our unit has mold, if she says that our unit is flooding in a certain way and I can't live there safely, well, she's having her housing paid for free. And in a lot of cases, if she complains, she's going to get kicked out. So making sure that our government, our federal government, is watching over our over the housing agencies and the state housing agencies to make sure that people like that can have safe housing. In the long term, I mentioned social housing. If we are able to build certain affordable housing, even if we can incorporate Section 8 into that, people who end up people can end up having a more affordable unit, but also if they can't afford that unit because wages have not met up, we can put people into that social housing. So it makes people who are trying to receive Section 8 from different areas, if a certain apartment or certain landlord, whether they are corporate or whether they are just a single unit family that owns it, then they will have the incentive to, if we want to get this unit filled and be able to be paid for this unit, then we need to improve the unit because they have the option of going to social housing. But in addition, you mentioned how much further can we do about unhousing. I think the biggest are people who are unhoused. The biggest part is making sure our lives are affordable. Where people can live in wage and they can have a salary and a job that is available that they can end up not putting 50% of their salary towards housing. The biggest thing is I currently live in Rancho. You drive around all the new properties, luxury housing. You look on the websites, it's luxury. You look on any type of new housing, it's always about luxury housing. And we need housing that is affordable so people don't get priced out of the market. So people can live and also be around communities of people that they wouldn't be around normally. If we bring down the cost of housing, you'll have people who are managers, janitors, teachers, maybe even CEOs too, all together just in an area if they just want to live, and they'll see people as more humans and they'd see people for what they really are, and that is a community, beautiful people that we have in this country. So in addition to that, I think we also need to make sure that our universities are making sure that students are taken care of, students who are unhoused, students who can't afford to live, who are just paying rent and then trying to survive off of whatever extra amount they get from their student loans. I think that is also something we should do, and making sure that the federal government is providing money for these unhoused, for homeless shelters, for cheaper shelters, because currently what Pete Aguilar last did in Redlands was he provided some federal dollars along with the state to then build homeless shelter, to convert motels into homeless shelters. But that was a very bad situation because a corporate group that they ended up giving money to, called I think Shangri-La, was then found to be a scam. The owners of it didn't renovate, they didn't do anything, they pocketed the money. That was a group that was just trying to make money off of this. If the federal government and the states work together to convert that motel in their own and then maintain the facility, then we'd have checks and balances that would go over and broad of what we need. And maybe those units would have been open a lot faster. Maybe those units would have been a lot better. Maybe we would have been able to escape the costly situation of then having to find a different corporate group to handle this situation than paying them our tax dollars. So that is how I would view the house situation.
Let's switch gears to your plan to break up monopolies as a future potential future member of Congress. You say on
Yep.
the Oh, can you hear me?
Oh,
Can you hear me
now I
now?
just got back. I'm sorry.
No
Something's going on
worries,
with
no
the internet
worries.
right now. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Break
Frontier doesn't like us having the interview right now.
breaking up monopolies. You say on you completed a Ballotpedia Canada Connection survey where you said that there is anti-competitive behavior happening in a variety of different markets. What do you mean by anti-competitive behavior taking place in our economy?
So if you've watched the news, even in like the past month, you are watching companies buy up all their competitors. It's happening with Paramount and HBO right now, with Netflix that wanted to come in. And Netflix even today announced they're going to increased pricing subscription. So they're increasing their prices. It's because when these companies notice that they own a lot of the market and they have so much people subscribe, and people, they take advantage of them. They take advantage of these people. They make sure that they can profit a lot from these people, because they'll either forget about the subscription or they make the subscription hard to cancel. So currently, to make it a little simpler to understand, anti-competitive. I studied antitrust law in law school. I focused a lot on this, and I view it as the future of our democracy. I view this as the next frontier of the legal system. We need to focus on holding companies accountable when they try and become way too big. Because in antitrust law, we want to have regulations, and when we don't have regulations, then we need the government to step in and break up these companies. So we've done this before with with many utility companies, and I think we need to do it again. Even this past few months, I've been dealing with Frontier and Verizon out here, because 2 years ago, Verizon bid to purchase Frontier, and that ended up going through with the FTC. And what happened was, I saw an increase in my price by $15, and then another $15 in the past 2 months, where I had to jump through so many hoops to even talk to a human being at Verizon to then get the price to what it should be, because they were advertising something that was completely lower. And when we don't have governments that hold these companies in check, then we end up paying a large part of our monthly wages to these companies who just hope that we forget, or hope that we have these barriers that we just give up and don't want to fight for a few dollars back. Because this is how these companies live. This is how these companies make record profits every year. And this is what I feel like the biggest thing that our federal government needs to do. We need to follow what Lina Khan started. We need to make sure we hold these companies accountable so they can't profit from everything, so they don't become so big. Recently, we saw our grocery bills skyrocketing, and we saw an FTC that wanted to break up a big merger between Kroger and Albertsons, and this would have created a huge monopolization of our grocery stores. When we walk around this district, you will see Albertsons and Ralph's right next, like not too far from each other. If one was able to buy the other, I can promise you they will close down one of those shops, fire everyone at that place, and then at the next place, they might lower the prices. They might lower the wages, or not prices. They might lower the wages of the people working there because they have nowhere else to go. Our FTC has amazing power to come after these big corporations to make sure that they are checked. So they make sure that, no, you are competing no matter what. You will either sell to someone else who is smaller, or you will stay there and you will not sell to the big competitors around. And that is how we bring it down prices. For anyone who doesn't understand antitrust law, I implore you to research it. I implore you to Google Lina Khan, listen to her talk about how our government should be working to make sure that our prices aren't going too high, to make sure that our government is working properly for the people and not letting these companies make record profits and then pay those record profits to their executives, to give golden parachutes, to do all these things. Because like I mentioned, Netflix, I mean, people need to be able to survive, and the real issue is housing, utilities, all these things, grocery stores. But a lot of people have also Netflix subscriptions. When we see that these prices in other markets are going high, sorry.
No worries.
A
No
lot of
worries.
talking.
No worries.
When we see that these prices are going higher in different markets, it's going to go to other markets. When we see Netflix raising their prices, what we are also seeing is a company that is very profitable right now. In 2025, they made $10 billion in net profits and net income. Then to go back and pay their shareholders $9 billion that year through stock buybacks, which was illegal before I was even born, I think Reagan brought it back. This type of practice needs to be stopped. We need to use the FTC, antitrust laws, labor laws, to claw back power into the working class people. And that is what I would want to do and focus our federal government powers on.
I'm going to ask a quick yes or no question as you drink a little bit of water.
Sorry.
There are Republican. No, totally okay. There are Republicans and free market libertarians who are against crony capitalism. They don't like the monopoly situation that you're mentioning. Would you work with Republicans in Congress, even if Democrats don't get a majority? Would you be willing to work with Republicans to break up monopolies?
Yes. Short answer, very yes. We need to work with whoever we can in the federal government, building coalitions of people who want to stop what's happening. And it's universal. It's the 1% versus the 99%. These people are hoarding a lot of our wealth, and it's not left or right. It's really 1% versus the working class.
Let's go to school funding, and then you'll get a chance to say anything that you would like. You want to increase funding for schools, though critics will point to the fact that there have been moments at the state level or even at the federal level where there has been an increase in funding for schools, but people will look at poor results as due to bureaucracy mismanagement, that mismanagement within bureaucracies is the reason why public schools are failing and it's not about a funding issue, how would you respond to critics who say there's already enough funding, it's about bureaucracy mismanagement, that's the real issue?
I think both are true. I think actually both are true. To talk about the funding first, what we need is to make sure our teachers are paid a livable wage where they don't have to go into their own paychecks to then fund their schools, buy pencils, buy a bunch of different things for their school to allow students to actually be able to learn. So I had teachers who would always talk about how they had to go into their own paycheck and do these things. And that is not how a society should work. That is not how we educate our youth. That is not how we go forward and make sure kids have the best opportunities and can thrive in schooling. So currently in California, they were prepping for, during pandemic, we had a surplus, and they ended up allocating quite a bit of money. Right now, there's not, some schools have had actually to fire, some school districts have fired and laid off many teachers and many counselors. For example, Pete Aguilar's district, where he was mayor, they, at the same month that he was voting to give $3.3 billion to Israel and giving police departments in the area $1 million each so they can buy Israeli surveillance technology. His own city that he was mayor of was laying off 138 teachers. This is a funding issue too, because our federal government has signaled that they don't want public education. They've been moving a lot of our funding for public schools and allowing teachers and allowing people, not teachers, but allowing people to then transfer that to private schools. So we're also funding private schools, and then we are judging public schools by the fact of we're giving them less and less money because we're also funding private schools the amount that the public schools should receive. And in no way am I saying that we shouldn't support private schools, but we also need to make sure our public system works. In the private sector, we see a lot of industries where there's a public option, there's some type of government work that is going on, and then what happens is we defund that system. Republicans are trying to do that with our Social Security. Republicans are trying to do that with Medicare, Medicaid, everything. They're trying to lower these services so they are unusable. We see this with the current with the big beautiful bill, where they are making it hard to stay on EBT and SNAP because they're making sure that you have to file repeatedly every week, everything, and then if you miss one time, then you're off of these funding. When we say that bureaucracy doesn't work, we need to consider, does it work because our politicians don't want it to and they want a profit incentive for the private investors that want to come in and then create that private option? Or does it not work because we're not funding it properly? Or does it not work because we're not putting care into it? And are we not getting the right results because we are not doing it properly? I think both are very true in our country right now. And that is something that we need to focus on. And that is something I would stand up and say every day on the House, that we need to make sure that we are not funding wars. We're not funding the bombing of schools in foreign countries when we have schools where kids go hungry. When we ended up giving students free lunch during the pandemic, we erased a lot of childhood hunger, and it improved lives. It improved a lot of things. And when we gave student tax credits, that also improved lives, and that decreased childhood poverty rates. So there's a lot our government can do if they have the will to do it, that would improve the material conditions of everyone in this country, in the education sphere too. And we just need politicians who are willing to do this. And I don't think the current Democrat Party cares or has the will to do any of this. And that is why I'm running too.
Every candidate who appears on this YouTube channel gets a chance to say whatever they would like. Some plug their campaign website, some want to add further details on what they said earlier. The floor is yours, Antonis Christodoulou.
Thank you. So I would like to finish off by just adding one more discussion on healthcare. We need a Medicare system for all. We need to make sure that people can actually afford to get healthcare and can afford and don't have to make sure they keep a job or are scared to even get laid off or lose a job, because many people are getting laid off currently. And we need people to know that they are protected by the government if they end up losing their job. So they so they can get healthcare. They can go to the doctor. They can get a dentist appointment. They can go and do mitigation in our healthcare system so they don't end up overloading our emergency rooms. And to further go, I understand on the campaign trail and also being a voter, on someone who's watched videos like this about campaigns and people running. I just want people to know that you shouldn't lose hope in our system. I've spoke with many people in the past few weeks where I've been campaigning where they've said, I don't believe in the system. I don't believe that we can govern. I believe that greed is taking over. I believe that we have no hope. And their solution is to just give up. And that is the last thing that we need. When people start feeling this way, that is exactly what these corporate interests, that's exactly what these big executives, what these billionaires, these 1% people want. They want us to stop caring because they're going to care. Your landlord's going to care. The hospitals that's trying to buy every other hospital in the area so they can profit off of increased prices on MRIs and other things, they're going to care. The people who own our grocery stores, they're going to care. The people who are debt collectors, they're going to care. Everyone's going to care. And if we lose hope as the collective, then we're tying one hand behind our back and fighting against a giant competition that has a lot of money. That's why I decided to run. I decided to run because I was tired of feeling hopeless. I joined the DSA, I joined these groups, and I met a lot of people who want this change. I went to protests. We're not alone. You may feel this way sitting at home on a laptop watching someone talk to you about running a campaign and how they want to change things. We're not alone. Trust me. There are more people out there that notice these issues, and they just need people to say it. And one reason why I'm in before you today is because I believe when we have people who say it, more people come out. Jesse Jackson passed away, and I didn't know that he ran, but I knew who he was. And when I learned about his campaign speeches, I felt passion. It is the exact same things that Bernie said, is the exact same things that many other people that come after them said. Bernie, AOC, Zoran, these people speak so others can stand up higher too. And just like many people, I want to witness the end of apartheid. I want to witness a free Palestine. I want to witness healthcare system that works. I want to witness people who can live a living wage, not worry about politics, and then just go to worry about politics, but then go to bars, go enjoy their lives with their friends because they can afford to. I want to witness an America that truly has the American dream again, because I was promised this as a kid, and we are not seeing it today for people my age. So my last message is keep your head up, organize, because together we are powerful. United, they are scared of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Antoni, for doing this interview. And that's the end. So thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you so much.